Okay, welcome back to our last video in the series, and a rather long one, and we're going to take on kind of a big project. It's going to use a lot of the skills we've used up till now to complete one big idea. So the big idea today is we want to build a user database, and we want to save it in a permanent file as a CSV, a comma separated values. So the values in the file will be separated by commas. And that file, as we build it, is going to save our usernames and our password. So as we're thinking about a big project like this, I want us to reflect on our discussion around functions and kind of thinking about, okay, what do we want to be able to do in our program? And then how do we build it from there? So the few things we want to be able to do are we want to be able to, our users to log in, our users to register, and then maybe have them log out. And when they log in, we need to obviously check the CSV to see if their login credentials are correct. So let's start a new file. Let's get going here. Call this user database .py. We're going to import a couple of libraries. One we haven't seen before, called CSV. This is going to allow us to work with CSV files. And we're going to import the OS library, which again is going to allow us to clear our screen when we want to in between interactions with the user. When I was originally writing this program, I thought kind of only doing a couple of different functions, but then I realized I was reusing a certain set of code a couple of times. When we register a user and when we log in a user, in both instances, we need to get the user info. And that occurred to me that, okay, this is actually a really good indication that we probably need a separate function that just revolves around getting the user info. So let's do that now. We're going to start with that function first. We're going to define our function getUserInfo. And this is only going to do two things. It's going to do three things. It's going to ask our user for their email. It's going to ask our user for their password, and then it is going to return those two values as a tuple. I want you to pause the video here and see if you can finish making this function. Remembering you're essentially needing three lines. One that is going to do some input, use the input function to get the user's email. One that's going to use the input function to get the user's password, and then you're going to return both those values as a tuple. If you've given that a shot and you're back now, let's go ahead and give it a try together. First, I'm going to set email equal to input email. And then I'm going to set password equal to input password. I think it goes throughout without saying that this isn't exactly the most secure program we're writing here. Our goal is not to actually practice security in this case, but just kind of the logic of a larger system and how we would break it down function by function. Now, remember I said I wanted to return these values as a tuple. So if I use the return statement, and we remember we declare tuples by using parentheses, and we just return email and password, just like that. This means whenever we use this function, we can set email and password equal to this and then have access to that information. And we're going to use this function at least twice. The other thing I said we wanted to be able to use, we wanted to be able to do is we wanted to be able to register a user. In this case, we want to use our file access skills. Now, the way we construct our file access here is going to be a little bit different than the video on file access, because I'm going to show you a different approach that makes sure that your scope of using the file closes automatically when you're done kind of in this code block. And that's by using this with statement. So let's go ahead and say def register user. And we're going to say with open. So we didn't quite do it like this before, but with open, we're going to say users.csv. That's the file name. And remember, in this case, as long as we set the mode properly, if it doesn't exist, it'll make it. And to do that, we want to set, this time, we're going to do mode equals A. And we're just going to say new line is going to be the same as an empty string in this case. And then we tell it how we want to refer to that file when we're opening it, in this case as F. So I'll pause here for a second and return to our file access video, because you remember the line we've just written is very similar to this line here. The complexity of it only adds to this complexity that we're going to be dealing with in a code block while we're dealing with this file. So we don't then need this line F close again. Now that we're inside the code block, we just hit enter and go down to the next line. This second line here has to do with our CSV library, and it allows us to make an object that will write to our file. So that's what we're doing here. We're giving it the file we want to write to and how we want to delineate values in our file. And since it's comma separated values, we're going to use a comma to delineate the file. So basically, writer is going to allow us to write information to our file, and it's going, file being F in this case, and it's going to delineate those by the comma. And we're using a built-in function to the CSV library called writer. Here we can print to register. Please enter your info. Now we want their email and their password, and lucky for us, we already wrote a function that gets that. So we just write email, password, and then we set those equal to get user info, open close parentheses. So that then is going to go back, call our get user info function, do the email, do the password call, and return those here. However, if we're having them register, we should probably confirm their password. So here, let's go ahead and have them input it again. Now, if their passwords match, we want to be able to register them to our file, and if not, we want to be able to alert the user. Let's first clean up our terminal a little bit. Remember, I'm on a Mac, so I'm going to use the word clear, but if you're on a Windows machine, CLS is probably what you want to do. And we're just going to say if password is the same as the confirm password, now we want to go ahead and add their information to our file. This is where that writer object we made earlier comes in. We can say writer, go ahead and write a row of information, and that row of information is going to include email, comma, password. Then we're just going to print a little message saying that that was successful. So you are now registered. But that was only if the passwords matched. If they don't, we should also let them know that they didn't match. Error. Passwords did not match. Wow, that's pretty good. We've already written two functions that get our information from our user and register our user to the file. The newish lines here are this one here and this one here. Pretty much everything else should be pretty familiar for you by now. And let's just clarify one more time what's happening here. This is creating a writer object that is built in the CSV library that just allows us to write information to our CSV file. And then here we're calling on a method that is a member of that class writer. So we're calling that method on our object writer, passing it the email and password so that it will then write it to the file. Now let's say we wanted our users to be able to log in. Login user, print to log in, please enter your info. Then we can once again use the function we got earlier to get the email and password. This time we're not confirming the password against itself, meaning we're not going to make them retype it. We want to confirm the information against the file that already exists. In order to do that, we need to open up and read the file. So the first thing I'm going to do is once they've typed their information, I'm going to go ahead and clear the screen again. Now, well, let's go ahead and leave off our error handling for a second. And we're going to actually force an error when we use our program to happen. And we'll see what happens. Okay, so once again, I'm going to open the file users.csv. In this case, the only mode we're going to be using is R, which means a read-only mode. We don't need to edit it here. We just need to read it. And we're going to open it as F as our file again. Last time we made a writer object from our CSV library. This time we're making a reader object from our CSV library. And we need to pass it essentially the same information. What's the file name? And what's the delineator? And it's a comma once again. Now we're going to loop through all the information in our file to test against row, name and password. So for row in reader, meaning for each row the reader is reading out, I want to see if row is equal to email, comma, password. If it is, print you are now logged in. And if not, actually, we don't want to print anything. And here's why. Because theoretically, if we have lots of users in our file, if we print something here, every time we check against one of those users and it comes back false, it'll print something out. We don't want that because theoretically, it's going to do that a bunch of times, come back false, because it's only going to come back true once. So we're just going to go ahead and return true here. In part because we want, once we find a valid entry, we just want to get out of this function. We don't want this to keep running. And return true is a really good way of doing that. So if we don't ever return true, meaning we never find a match, something went wrong, try again, and go ahead and return false. We never found true. You weren't logged in. Go ahead and return false. We're going to have some more work to do in that function to handle some errors in a second, but let's first jump into our main loop. Think about this kind of as, okay, this is the main program that is going to call those helper functions that we just wrote. First of all, when we're doing like a main loop, we tend to like to have a variable that starts off at true. We'll loop using that variable and eventually send it to false when we want to stop looping. Additionally, we need to track whether the user is logged in. And initially, we will say the user is not logged in. So now we start our loop. While active, right? That's our loop. While active is true. If the user is logged in, we're going to present them with certain options. We're going to say they can log out, or they can quit. And that'll be essentially their menu of options, right? They can log out or they can quit. Sorry, I should have put these in quotes. And you'll notice that I'm using this escape and N, meaning I want these on two different lines, kind of like a menu would be. You could also label these with numbers, although you don't want to get too confusing because your user may then enter the numbers instead of the words. And we're going to write it as if they're going to enter the words for our purposes. Now, if our user is not logged in, then we need to print a different menu. In this case, they can log in. They can register. they can quit. And those will be their options if they are not logged in. Okay, then we're going to give them a choice. Input. What would you like to do? And go ahead and make that lowercase so we're not dealing with capitalization issues when we're trying to do our check to see what they chose. Once they make their choice, let's go ahead and clear the screen for them. Now we're going to go through their possible choices and trigger what should happen each time. And this gets a lot easier because all of a sudden, now we know we've already written a lot of this work. Now we want to check two things initially. If they select register and they're not logged in, then we can send them to the register. If they selected register and they are logged in, which by the way isn't even a choice on our menu, but let's say theoretically they typed that, we don't actually want them to be able to register again. But in this case, if they aren't logged in and they do choose register, we do want them to go ahead and be able to call the register user function. Else if choice equals log in, and remember they don't want to be able to log in if they're already logged in, so we'll only let them log in if they're not logged in. But if we do let them log in, all we have to do is change whether they're logged in and set that in equal to login user. Now, why this construction here? Well, if you'll remember our login user function, we returned true if the login was successful and false if it wasn't. That works out really well here. We can then change our variable logged in to true or false depending on how the logging in goes for them. If the choice is to quit, then we're just simply going to set our active variable to false, which will stop the loop, thus ending the program. Finally, there's one more choice. If they want to log out, and they are logged in, we're simply going to say logged in equals false, and now they are logged out again. And we can go ahead and let them know that. Finally, if they type anything else, we still want to give them some feedback that what they typed wasn't really a valid choice. So we'll go ahead and let them know that. Sorry. Invalid option. And there's our whole register user login program. Let's go ahead and run it. Python 3 user database.py and see if we made any mistakes. Okay, we have our options of login, register, or quit. I want to display for you an error that's already in our program. I was going to fix ahead of time, but I think it's valuable for you to see. Let's assume we haven't registered. In fact, we know that nobody's registered, but let's go ahead and try to log in. We give them an email. something@something.com. We give them the password 12345, and we automatically crash our script, and we have a problem. The problem here is when our login function is called and we open up the file, we open it up in read-only mode. Read-only mode is one of the modes that will not create the file if it does not exist. It actually just throws an error. In that case, what we can do instead is wrap this whole work in a try method, making sure that our indentation stays correct. if the try method works, but we don't find a correct login, it'll go through all that. However, if the try method doesn't even work, what should we tell our user? Well, if the try method doesn't work, that means nobody has registered, but somebody has tried to log in. So I think a simple statement that says, no registered users, please register first. This little addition will actually prevent our program from crashing when someone tries to log in. It'll simply reroute them back to the menu. Let's go ahead and log in again. Sum@sum.com. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it says no registered users, please register first. And it reroutes us back to the original menu. We could even get fancy and not have login appear if there aren't any registered users and just have register be our first option. That might be another way of sort of fixing this issue. I would always have the error handling in there no matter what, just in case somebody stumbled their way towards your login portion and tried to log in without registered users. I generally think error handling in a clear and consistent way like this helps your scripts work better long term. Let's go ahead and do the proper thing though and register first. Oh, I've spelled it wrong. I've spelled it wrong in our program, I bet. Maybe you see the error already, but I'm going to spend some time and try to figure out what I've done wrong here. Let's see. So if I do register if choice equal register and login, that should be true. Let's try quit. Okay, quit works. That's great. Let's rerun our program. And let me try register again. Invalid option. Login works, but register does not. Oh, there we go. Not sure what I did before. Sum@sum.com. We're registering now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we're registered and we can log in. Sum@sum.com. Password 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're logged in. We can log out. We're logged out. We can try to log in again, but this time maybe we used the wrong @sum.com 11111. Something went wrong. Try again. The login didn't work. We can also register another user if we want. s@s.com 1111 1111. And now we have two users. s@s.com 1111. And we are logged in again, log out again, and quit. And we have a working user database. And if we come over here to our user CSV, you can see our two users listed here, each one on a different line separated by commas to show rows, right? These are the rows that we're finding. So that is how you would build a user database interaction script from scratch in Python. Now, here are the challenges I have for you, and they're twofold. I would like you to write another option, a function that allows the user to change their password. So you will add a function that would allow changing of a password, and you will come down here and include that in a logged in, right? If they are logged in, you will change that in their logged in menu and call that function from here. Additionally, when registering, we now also want to know your favorite food. So when you get the user information, get their favorite food and add that to the information you add to the file. When they log in, you should say something about their favorite food. All right, good luck.